guy who I've been a fan of for many, many, many years, and his album that came out in the 80s, Drums Along the Mohawk, is one of my all-time favorites. It's interesting. There's people that ask me all the time, they know me as being a hard rock guy, but they're like, if there's stuff that's not like all-out hard rock, is there anything you like? Are there any records you really like? This would be one of them. Drums Along the Mohawk was just an amazing record. I still listen to it all the time. He's done a ton of stuff beyond that. He was in the Plasmatics. He's written with Kiss. He's had multiple bands, Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul, Gary U.S. Bonds. It goes on and on. The guy is mega talented and an old friend. We welcome to the show, Jean Beauvoir. Sean, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, Eddie. Thank you so much for a great introduction. You make me look too good, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, I meant it all. The book, Jean has a book out, his autobiography. It's called Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon. Jean, before I get into anything here with you, I'm curious because I was saying, I was talking about your name earlier, and I was like, pronouncing it properly. And did you ever, first of all, that is your real name, right?
That's my real name. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So when you started in the music business, did you have anybody in your head being like, you should really become Jimmy Stevens or something like that, trying to get you to change it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I signed with my manager, Gary Kurfirst, which was the first, manager with Drums Along the Mohawk and everything, he did mention that to me. He said, did you ever think of changing your name? I said, well, I really want to keep my name. I think eventually people will be able to pronounce Jean. Well, Beauvoir is difficult too. And he said, John, there's only two things that don't work in America, French and Japanese. That was his comment.
Well, I'm glad you kept it. Yeah, I'm listening. I'm glad you kept it because I think it's cool. And I mean, what's in the name? You hear these stories like, Lenny Kravitz was Romeo Blue, and then he just said, "Oh, screw it, I'm going to stay Lenny Kravitz." Didn't hurt him anyway.
There you go. That's right. I felt that way. I felt that you should just, stick to yourself, and if you can make things happen, it helps the name. That's a good name. It just says Beauvoir, which is actually it means good to see. Voir
is that right?
And then Beau is like you see a lot of names, Beau Brummel, Beau, but Beau really means beautiful or good looking. Good luck. I'm not. That's what it means.
You don't age, man. And so whatever it is has worked. I told you all the time, you always look the same. And the other thing that's very identifiable about you, for people that know you in your career, is the Mohawk. The album was called Drums Along the Mohawk. You still rock the Mohawk. I mean, anybody that sees you immediately knows there's Jean with the Mohawk. You still look great. You still got the Mohawk. When did the Mohawk come into existence for you? I mean, you've had that pretty much your whole career.
Yep, pretty much so. I mean, right before I joined the Plasmatics, actually at one point, I had already dyed a little bit of the middle of my head white, so it was almost like a skunk look. Then I joined the Plasmatics. I actually shaved my head at the very beginning, but then I said, nah, I'm going to let it grow, and I just let a white mohawk grow, and it just became a part of me, where I don't feel normal without it, To be honest, I've tried some years where I said, I'm not going to have the mohawk, we'll wear hats and do this. But I've honestly never felt comfortable with myself. It's very strange. But it's true.
Seeing you without it would be like seeing Billy Gibbons without his beard. It's like they're very identifiable things. I've told Billy many times, I'm like, hey man, if you ever wanted to go to the supermarket or to a show and not be bothered at all you got to do is shave the beard. There's not one person that would pick out Billy Gibbons without the beard.
You're so right. It's the same thing with me. It's a big difference when you don't have people just don't recognize you. But come on, they definitely do.
Yeah,
It's like Kiss with the makeup, right?
It's totally
they don't
right.
walk around with their makeup.
So Jean, as I told the audience and I told you, I know this book came out a little while ago, and I apologize it's taken so long to get you on, but I always would love to read books before I talk to the person who wrote them about him. And it's so challenging because doing this 6 times a week, I got so much coming at me. Reading a book is so time consuming, it's hard to get to. And I will get to it one day because I love you and I want to read it. But I know you wanted to come on regardless to at least talk about it and let people know that the book is out there. So tell the audience, if you will.
It's also an audio book.
Okay.
It's also an audio book, so you can listen in the car, in the bathtub, whatever, So
right. Did you read the audio yourself?
I actually didn't. I wanted to at one point. It's a long story, but there was somebody else who read it. It actually did. He did a pretty good job. So it's all right. I think that people will be satisfied. I may do another read it once myself, actually. In the future, because I think a lot of people have asked that. They like to hear the voice of the person.
So tell the audience, because you started in music at an incredibly young age. Your first time being on the road and touring you were like 14, 15 years old, right?
Yep. It was very young. It started early. I loved music from the very beginning. I started like 10, 11. I was already, obsessed with music. And next thing you know, I started playing drums. That was my first, besides recorder in school, but I started playing drums. And I just was playing them in my bedroom all the time. I practiced for hours and hours and hours. And from there, I joined a junior high school rock band, not joined, formed. So that was at about 13 years old. I was a drummer at the time. I was the singing drummer. I taught myself, I would just listen to records. And it was all rock records, and I just played everybody. Zeppelin to this, to that, to that. And I was, I learned fairly quickly, when I was young. I think I still do, but But anyways, and I just continued doing that. And I had a teacher in the school, and he said, I know you play drums, rock drums. Why don't we put together a little thing? I had a band, and we opened for the Who once, and he always talked about that. So we ended up putting a band together, and we get like 3 or 4, guitarists, people that wanted to play this, like a school of rock, an actual school of rock, which I'm involved in now and have been for years. But it's funny, I started in a school of rock, and that's how it all started. And from there, the road came just that next year. Because after I put the band together, we did a year and a half, 2 years of, 2 years of playing school events, etc. That next summer, I actually was playing clubs, and I got some older guys to join the band. Because I could lie my age. I looked like I was 30. I had a mustache. I looked pretty old at that age. You try to look old when you're young, and you try to look when you're
right. Totally.
Right. And then, So I'm out there, and all of a sudden, a manager comes over. His name is John Apostle, and he was Gary U.S. Bond's manager. And he said, "Hey, kid, listen, you want to go on the road?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course." And he said, "Well, listen, I like you, and I think Gary will too. I represent him, and I'm coming to his house this weekend. You guys get together, and let's see what happens." So I did. We went, we played a little bit, we talked, everything, and finally he just said to me after the weekend, he said, "It's yours. Meet me in Florida." This is the first gig with Sarasota, I think it was, or some hotel. And he said, "We're there for this amount of time. Here's the truck. Bring equipment. I don't rehearse. Here are the songs. I'll see you there." And that was the beginning.
So it was Gary U.S. Bonds. Jean, for people in my audience, it's predominantly a hard rock audience. Tell them about Gary U.S. Bonds. I'm aware of who he was or is, but is he still? I don't know the history, but give people the update on him, because he was kind of like a Springsteen-esque kind of rock and roll guy, right?
Well, no, that came way after. Gary U.S. Bonds had a hit called "A Quarter to Three" back in like 1962 or something.
Oh, wow.
That's what made him. So he was a star, and he continued to play and everything. And Bruce Springsteen was always a big fan of his. So was Stephen.
Got it.
So that's where the Springsteen thing came into it, is that ironically later on, they started working together. Say little Stephen and Gary U.S. Bonds, because Bruce approached Gary to make a new record for him, and he gave him another hit with that song, "This Little Girl Is Mine." Remember? It was a number 5 Billboard.
I remember there was a connection between him and Bruce. That's why I was trying to trace it.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. So that same manager, when I was 14 years old, approached me and offered me to come on tour. So I went out with Gary, and that was the beginning. And he loved that. And from there on, we just started doing shows throughout that summer until he found out I was 15, going to be 15 in August.
Were you, Sean? Were your parents supportive of you at 15 years old being on the road?
No, they kicked me out of the house. My father did. At 15, that same year, my dad had given me an ultimatum. One day he came home and he looked at the equipment and he said, by tomorrow, either every piece of musical equipment is out of this house or you are. You decide.
And how did you learn? How did you learn to play at such a young age? Because you play multiple instruments. You play guitar, you play bass, you play drums. I mean, you play a lot of stuff. At 15, 14, being a touring musician, I mean, how did you were you self-taught on everything? Did it just come quickly and naturally to you?
Yeah, it came very quickly and naturally to me. And I mean, it's funny. I've got a son, and I'm watching him right now. How quickly he learns. I mean, I watched him literally become like a very good piano player in literally 2 months. And wow. I'm sitting here going, well, so if I had any genes, maybe I had it's a gift, that you can learn things quickly. And as a kid, I did learn things quickly, and I was very intense. Like my brother had a bass. So when I played drums in the junior high school rock band at first, but then we couldn't find a bass player. So I said, my brother's got a bass. I'll learn bass and move to bass. And I taught my neighbor, who was a schoolmate, how to play drums. I can remember sitting with him. His name's John Romano. I can still remember his name. And I said, you're going to be our new drummer. And then so he learned, and he became a great drummer, by the way. And then after that was it. That was just pretty crazy. Next thing, I'm playing different instruments. I'm playing bass. And I would practice, hours and hours and hours a day. I would just sit in a room, lock myself in. I was very intense. When I wanted to do something, I was, I really put the time into it.
So from
that's
Gary,
how I learned everything.
So from Gary U.S. Bonds, do you go from there to the Plasmatics?
Well, there's a little lull in between. Okay, so I've got Gary U.S. Bonds, so we're touring. We played in Las Vegas. We played all these Dick Clark Arena shows, throughout the U.S. It was quite the experience. And sometimes people like Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, and these guys sometimes would forget somebody. Would not have a play. Oh, my bass player's not here, or this didn't happen, and I'd jump in. So all of this was an incredible lesson as well, because you're learning. You're out there on the road playing all the time. And it's really crazy. So after that, I went through a little period of that. Then I said, I want to maybe. I actually thought about going back to school for a minute just to, have something under my belt, like my parents would think. So I moved to New Jersey. I get into a little local band, blah, 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 and I start playing. I actually worked with the Flamingos. I became a lead singer for that band, the Flamingos, that has I Only Have Eyes for You.
Uh-huh.
You remember that song, I Only Have Eyes for You?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so we would play Vegas, we'd play here, and then from there, my apartment burnt down in New Jersey one day. I came home, and I had left the Flamingos. I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. You've got to get into the book to really get all the details.
Yeah, for sure.
This time between the Flamingos and me, doing some little stuff while I'm, thinking about going to school. Anyways, my apartment burns down. I'm left with almost nothing. He gave me a check for $125 from the city. I went and bought a shot motorcycle jacket. And I moved into the city. I had really no place to live. So for a while, I was literally living on the floor at times on the Lower East Side, to the point where I found a band down there that was called NYN rehearsing. And I became their lead singer. It was a crazy little band. And we ended up opening for the Plasmatics at my father's place.
Okay.
One day. I met them. Everything was okay, blah, blah, blah. We said hello, nothing of it. A few weeks later, I see an ad for a bass player. So I just said, okay, guys. I called the manager. He said, I remember you, blah, 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 blah. But we're auditioning people. So they had a lot of auditions going for a while. But then next thing you know, they called me and they said, if you want the gig, it's yours. And that's it. And that was the beginning of my my punk childhood.
How long were you in the Plasmatics? How many years?
Actually, it's about 3, I guess. It was 1979 until almost 82.
Jean, was it as crazy being in a band like the Plasmatics as it looked from a fan perspective on the outside? Like when you saw cars blowing up and Wendy O out there with no shirt on and just the mayhem that went on. What was it? Sometimes you see that, like, you look at a band like Kiss, for example, and you'd be like, oh my God, those guys got to be the most over the top, outrageous people. In reality, they're completely opposite of what they portray on stage, at least Gene and Paul. But in the Plasmatics, was what you saw pretty much like what it was off stage as well?
Well, in some ways, yes. When it comes to, if you're saying drugs or alcohol, nothing like that. We were a very conservative band. Nobody did drugs. I'm not going to say nobody. I think one time our guitar player got caught and got in trouble for doing something. We were young, remember. We were kids. I was 19 when I was in the Plasmatics, so we were really young. But as far as all the other craziness, we were in the middle of it because there was no discipline. There was no regulation. So, for example, you'd get on that stage. I was married at that time. I met a girl. I married her. She wouldn't come to the shows because she said, I'm not going to go watch my husband almost die. She was like a pretty conservative German girl. She said, I'm not coming to the shows. Because we'd have things blowing up on us. Wendy would turn around. She had that shotgun. It wasn't real bullets, but nevertheless, when she aimed it at you and hit you from 5 feet away, you felt it. And we had things blowing up. We had a hood that would go up, and our pyro guy, who actually became a fantastic big Vegas pyro guy, does movies, does all kinds of stuff. But back then, he was just throwing gasoline or things into things. We were doing this in venues. It was just crazy. So we never knew what happened. Like the hood would go up. It burned all the curtains of the Calderon Theater one time. But all that stuff comes down on us.
Right. Yeah, you end up paying that out of your guarantee at the end of the night, no doubt.
I'm then falling on our heads because it's on stage. So all that craziness,
But financially comes down on you, too, at the end of the night when you got to sell.
Yeah, it does. It does. Like when we did that Pier show. If anybody wants to see that, they should go and take a look at the Pier show. Pier 62. I don't know if you ever saw that. It's a great little film of when we built the stage, and that was the start of shows at the Pier in New York, actually.
Yeah.
And we built the stage. We did 6-song set, and Wendy got into a Cadillac, drove it into the stage. All the tops of the buildings were filled with people. It was wild. I think we had a permit for like 3,000 people, and 10,000 more showed up. It was a free show. And everything went into the Hudson River. The car blew up the whole stage, all the equipment. And we had to spend, I think, 2 weeks with frogmen to go take everything out of the Hudson River as agreed with the city.
Oh, my God. I got to look that up. That's on YouTube. I never saw that.
Oh, you have to look at that. That's pretty intense. So if you're going to look at anything, I think that's the thing that was one of the highlights, I'd say. Pier 62.
So just jumping around a little bit in the interest of time, and again, all of this is covered in Jean's book, which is out now. Do you go go from the Plasmatics to Little Steven? Is that the next major jump?
Yeah. That's the next thing I did. It was after I left the Plasmatics, I actually had surprisingly a lot of bass offers. I don't know. I guess people watch more than you think. But my first offer was Prince, and then which I didn't end up taking. And also I was Billy Idol and Steve Stevens were like, come on and play with us. So I actually helped them find a bass player. I wanted to do a solo thing. So I didn't want to go with anybody else. And then I met Steven through that same manager, Gary U.S. Bond's manager, John Apostle. You wouldn't believe it. I just called him. What's going on? How you doing? Oh, we're working with Springsteen and Little Steven. Why don't you check? I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, why don't we rehearse in your place for Gary's thing, and maybe you can get to know Little Steven. That's exactly what he said, So Steven met me, and he basically said, Johnny, you're not going to – nobody's going to sign you. I've been trying to get a solo deal from the very, as soon as I left the Plasmatics, and nobody's going to sign you. You have no credibility. And so he said, but come play with me. I'm taking a little break from Bruce Springsteen to make an album. And why don't you come be my guy? I said, okay. And he talked me into it. It made sense, if you know what I mean. He said, we'll do demos, we'll do this, we'll do that. And the road will seem much easier. So anyways, I played with him for a while. And then after Steven, We did a lot. We did 2 major tours, to Europe, the U.S. We did Rock Palace, all the big TV shows, and so it was a good experience. And we had 2 different lineups. I played bass the first year with the big band of 12, 13 members, Little Steven. It was like. And then we had Disciples of Soul, and then we had another lineup of just 4 members. So it was me, Gary Tibbs, 5, and Dave Rosenthal on keyboards. From Rainbow, and so it was a great. Patino Denelli on drums, Gary Tibbs was from Roxy Music, and Adam and the Ants. I was playing guitar, and Steven. That was a fun band. And then, I did that, and from there I moved on. I still wanted to do the solo record, so I just finally got signed for my big solo record after a while. After Steven.
Yeah, and Drums Along the Mohawk, as I mentioned, still one of my favorite records. It did fairly well, Jean, but why, in retrospect, do you think that it didn't go and establish you as a big solo star? I know you had told me in the past it actually did really well outside of America, did better outside of America than here.
Absolutely.
And obviously, the tie-in on for people listening, for Drums Along the Mohawk, the song on that record, Feel the Heat, was in a Stallone movie, so it got a lot of coverage with that as well. I remember it was on MTV quite a bit at the time. But
quite a bit, that's right.
It didn't go to the level I'm sure you had hoped it would in America. What do you attribute that to?
Well, no, that's right. No, everybody felt the same. Al Keller signed me. He signed Michael Jackson, and he loved the album. He thought it was the greatest album, and he thought that thing was going to fly. He was having a lot of trouble at the time because during that time we had a lot of racial issues at radio. Mm-hmm. So there was still. So he was having problems. He was trying to offer radio stations things to try to promote the record, but they didn't know where to put me. They didn't know if I belonged on the black floor, the urban floor, the white floor. I was kind of stuck in the middle. So so radio kind of felt that way a little bit too. So I think that he had a hard time. No matter how hard he tried, he really wanted to, but that was the problem. He just had pushback.
Well, the other thing,
we don't have that in Europe.
Yeah, but the other thing about it, and if you really, just in our conversation alone up to this point, if you think about it, and this to me is a real hallmark of you as a musician, a talent, a writer, you have huge amount of diversity in the stuff you play and the people you work with and the music you make. So in the time we've talked, the last 25, 30 minutes already, you've touched on Gary U.S. Bonds, you've touched on the Flamingos, you've touched on a punk over-the-top thing like the Plasmatics, Little Steven, so you run the gamut from pop to R&B to reggae to punk to heavy rock. I mean, all of it. And although some people really like that, from a marketing perspective, you look at all of that and, oh, yeah, it's a black dude with a mohawk. What do we do with this guy? I would imagine it's a nightmare, especially in the mid-'80s, to figure out where to put you, not just even image-wise, but even musically, because if you listen to Drums Along the Mohawk, and it's a record I love, within that record, there's a lot of diversity. So I know that for you as an artist, that's probably what you want to do, but I would think that's got to be a real hard thing to get you over the hump.
Well, it is hard sometimes. In fact, I've had to kind of slim things down because I even created, kind of aliases that started maybe as a band, like Crown of Thorns, Voodoo X, and I realized all of a sudden things that you actually did, other people are getting credit for, and you're not getting, and people are saying, no, but we don't want that. We want those guys. But you were saying, wait, those guys didn't play on the record. Doesn't matter. So it's funny. I've had to find a way to kind of slim things down. But I always liked, that was my goal. I wanted to be a producer, a successful producer, songwriter, and artist independently of each. And I always felt I didn't want to have any barriers as far as what came to my mind. So, for example, you mentioned those names. I also did NSYNC. I wrote Lionel Richie. I wrote Nona Hendrix. All different, anybody that I could write with. I'm going to write country soon, with some people who are pretty well known down there. I love it because a great song, great melodies, no matter what it is, whether it's got heavy guitars or all keyboards or violins. To me, it's a great song. And I love the challenge of being able to do different things and also to succeed at different things. It's my own personal goal, but you're right. It makes it difficult for people when you have all of those things like that, even now.
You know, you mentioned Crown of Thorns. For people that don't know, that was an amazing heavy rock band that you did. That was that with the late Bob Kulick on guitar? He was part of that too, right?
No, not Bob Kulick. It was Mickey Free who played on that album.
Mickey Free. I'm sorry. I thought you did
That's
something
right.
with Bob.
Yeah,
I might be off on that.
I've done stuff with Bob, but just actually, we more just know each other. We actually haven't played together. Come to think of it, at all. I knew him for a long time. I knew him for a long time, and Bruce, of course, as well. Yeah. Mickey Free was on that album. Tony Thompson was on the drummer on that. I don't know if you know who he is. He played.
Of course, Tony Thompson, a Chic and the Power Station. I mean, monster. Sadly passed away, but monster drummer. Monster drummer.
And I loved him. He was fantastic. We had Michael Page on bass, and then me. That was pretty much the band. And Gene and Paul were involved. We were signed by Jimmy Iovine. Well, Jimmy had called me. He offered me a solo deal originally. That's what he wanted me to do. But at the time, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make this rock record, and there were some guys, Tony, Mickey. They were great rock players, but they just didn't have any opportunity to get out there and show their stuff. So we kept running into each other, and I said, guys, why don't you come on board with me for this, and let's do this. This could be something, and then it took off. Jimmy was like, okay, you want to do it that way? Let's go. But unfortunately, the record did not come out in the U.S., but it came out, again, all over the world.
Yeah, for people who have never heard the Crown of Thorns stuff, it's incredible. So definitely check that out. It's kind of like a sleeper hard rock thing that was just killer. I can't let you go without asking you about your affiliation with Kiss, because so many people in my audience are huge Kiss fans, and it's a band we talk about all the time on this show in all different ways. But you got very involved in co-writing songs with Kiss in the mid-'80s. Talk about how that happened and some of the stuff you did with those guys.
Okay, but quickly, not to backtrack, I just wanted to tell you for a second that also for the Crown of Thorns, there were several other albums after that. Some I did alone, but some with Hawk Lopez and Tom Lafferty and Michael Page. But anyway, now for the Kiss. That's a crazy story, actually. Paul and I met in a disco. We were just at the club downtown. We were just hanging out. It was a diner. What was the name of that diner again? Anyways, it looked like the Empire Diner, but it was a place where that everybody went to, actors, musicians, etc. And one day, I walk in, and Paul actually points to me and says, hey, you're that guy from the Plasmatics, right? Like, yeah. And I didn't quite recognize him because he had no makeup, and it was makeup time for them at that time. And I said, well, Stanley, because of course I loved Kiss my whole life, And the next thing you know, that's it. We became friends. We exchanged numbers. We hung out. We talked. We went to movies. We went to clubs. We did all kinds of things as friends before we actually wrote a song. And a year later, one day he walked in with an acoustic guitar in his apartment. We were just hanging out, and we ended up writing Thrills in the Night. And that was
Thrills in the Night was the first thing that you guys wrote together.
Yes. Yep. And then we liked writing together, and we just continued. So for the next album, Who Wants to Be Lonely and All Night, we wrote together.
On Asylum.
And then at the same time, Paul and I wrote actually several songs. Actually, we had a song that we wrote called Like a Bee to the Honey that we wrote just we would go into the studio and just record some songs just for us. Maybe it's something that somebody else will take, or maybe for me or whatever. But Lordi, that band from Europe, I don't know if you know them. They were Finnish, you know them, great band. I've written several songs with them as well, matter of fact, in the past 3-4 years. But they ended up taking us that song that Paul and I did, and they had a hit over there in Germany. And wow. It propelled the album to, like, I don't know, number 13 in the charts or something. So that's an old thing that Paul and I did together. And we wrote several other songs that have not been released, and other things. And something for Voodoo X we wrote together. And Crown of Thorns, matter of fact.
And didn't you,
then,
did you contribute to those songs that later came out in the Shocker movie soundtrack?
Yes, I wrote the song Shocker.
That's what I thought.
Desmond Child and I wrote that song together. We were just sitting in the EMI. We both were having meetings, I guess, with our EMI publishers, and they just came to us and said, "Hey, you two guys are in the house. Shocker needs the title track now." He said, "Why don't you guys go in the piano room and go write it?" And we did exactly that.
Wow.
And it ended up, and it was a great time. Tommy Lee played drums, and we also played guitar. I mean, played bass on it. Vivian Campbell, I believe, was on it. Yeah, we put together a little thing for it, and it was good. So that's what I did with Shocker. And I also played bass on the Kiss albums, by the way. I think you do that too, right? On several Kiss albums.
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, I know over the years we've learned that Kiss had a lot of ghost players on various tracks, and sometimes, they themselves even didn't play on certain things. But what albums or songs did you actually play bass on?
Well, I got to remember them all, to be honest with you. But it was both Asylum and Animalized.
Okay.
And definitely Who Wants to Be Lonely, All Night. Was it Get All You Can Get? I've got to look at the titles. I'm getting older, Eddie.
We all are,
it's
John.
About four songs on that record and 3 songs. But it's credited. It's on Wikipedia. It says right there. And that came later because when I did it, it wasn't like a hired or credited or anything like that. It was more like Paul and I were going to a dinner. And he'd say, "Well, why don't you come by the studio before we go," or something. And I'd walk in, or he'd say, "Oh, you want to play bass on this song?" I said, "Okay." And Gene was always cool about it. Gene always liked me, I think.
Well, that was always, and that was a time for Kiss where Paul was really having to steer the ship because Gene was starting to dabble in acting and was kind of drifting from Kiss. And I know a lot of those records Paul wrote and produced himself, trying to hold it together. So it's not surprising, and it's come out that there were tracks that even Paul played bass on, or Eric Carr played bass on, or whatever, because Gene just wasn't around. So it's not surprising at all to find that out. It's funny. Growing up as a Kiss fan, I mean, in that time, if you would have heard something like that, it's probably why they kept all these ghost players secret, because you would have freaked out, because it would have been like, "Oh my God, the band's ending." And now
it wasn't the thing. Exactly.
Now it's like, commonly known and accepted and put out there.
That's right. Well, which is a good thing. It's cool. I like that. I like it. You got a chance to do that. But yeah, so it's about, and now it ends up on a lot of records, because it's, first the 4 songs you played on one, the 3 you played on the other. I think it's about 7 songs all in all. And then after that, they keep re-releasing and re-releasing and re-releasing. So
right.
It's nice.
Right.
It's a nice feeling. Let's put it this way. You're not making any money from it, but it's a nice feeling.
So listen, man, I'm running short on time, and I know that we're just scratching the surface of this book and your story. The book, again, is out now, Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon, written by Jean Beauvoir, with John Ostrowski as the co-writer. I know Johnny O for many years, so that's cool.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I know Johnny O forever. So, Jean, bring people up to speed, and I know we're missing huge gaps, but I can't wait to read the book and get more into it then. But most importantly now, tell people what you're doing now. What's happening now? Where can they find you? Where can they hear you? What are your projects currently?
Okay, I'm working out of Southwest Florida. I've got a very cool band together. Johnny Hyatt, Dallas Zeta, Stet Howland from Wasp is my drummer. And we played festivals in Sweden last year. So I'm getting ready to go do festivals this year. So far Sweden and hopefully, Germany, everything's being booked right now as we're discussing it. So we're rehearsing here. We have a whole nice setup here. I've got a lot of music going to release. So I'm right in the middle of deciding exactly how these records will be released in the best way within the next several months here. But I will be releasing new music very soon. So that's one thing. And what else can I tell you? Also, I just was asked to be on the honorary member on the board of the Music Alive Southwest Florida. which is a great organization down here that's connected. It's actually the guy from School of Rock, the owner of School of Rock down here, who set this up. And it's to help musicians and to get kids off the street and get them playing music and, and basically just help musicians that lost instruments and stuff from relief from all the hurricanes we've been having down here, which has been a shame. So they've been giving grants to other musicians to get into school to learn instruments. So I think it's a great little program. So that's something that I'm also involved in besides playing, recording, rehearsing, and that's it. That's what I do.
That's a lot, man. It's a lot. You always got cool, different stuff happening, and everything you've done has always been very cool and a great level of quality to it, man. So I'm glad we could find some time to get you on here and talk, just, again, scratching the surface on your incredible career. The book is out now as a book or the audio book, as Jean mentioned. Again, it's Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon. Any social media you want to hit, Jean, where people can find you or contact you, and what do you have?
Everywhere. Yep. Everything. My website, JeanBeauvoir.com. I'm on Instagram, Jean Beauvoir. Facebook, Jean Beauvoir Official, or Jean Beauvoir. So yes, everything's right there. So please hit me up or take a look at what I'm doing. Keep an eye on things and keep everything updated. I will let you know, and I can't wait to get back out there.
I'm going to. You know what? I didn't know you were on Instagram, but I literally, while you said that, just clicked you off to follow you. So now I'll get you there too. So that's cool.
Wonderful. I love it.
You got one extra follower at least, John.
That's so great. Well, I appreciate it, Eddie. I always love talking to you. You've been a great supporter all these years, and I respect what you do. I really do, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, man. Likewise, and I will definitely hope to see you soon, somewhere down the line, and hope to see you playing. And
we will.
You know that at least once a week I'm still firing up Drums Along the Mohawk in my listening, because it's lived since it's come out.
That's impressive.
Well, at least, you know what? I go in spurts. Like I'll go to it and I'll be like, God damn, this is so good. And I'll go on this run listening to it like at least once a week. Then I'll put it to rest for a little while. And then I'll shuffle through, and I'm like, oh man, I got to go back to that, and it's just song after song, so good. So
it's been mentioned by some people that I should do a tour of just that album, because there are other people who really like that album, especially in Europe, Sweden, Germany, And
it'd be cool if you did a tour. Right? Yeah, it'd be cool if you did a tour where you did that album in its entirety, and then, other various stuff, because you got so much other good stuff, mix it up. But yeah, I mean, that would be awesome if you did that album start to front, It's only 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. I'm thinking about it. I mix all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But you can be sure that I'm staying active.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, buddy, stay in touch. Congrats on the book, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay. Speak soon.
See you, man. Bye-bye. There he goes, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Jean Beauvoir, great, talented dude, and definitely check out the book. I can't wait to read the book. Honestly, I just, the book came out, I think, like a year ago, and Jean has been, I've been in touch with him, and I'm like, I kept putting him off to come on the air because I wanted to be able to have read the book before I talked to him. Like we just had Marty Friedman on for his book a couple weeks ago. The only reason why I got that book in before I talked to him, and that was just under the wire, is because I was flying a lot, so I had a chance to read. That's the only time I really have a chance to read. And lately, not even that, because I'm busy with texts and emails on planes even. But I really wanted to read the book in advance, and I told him in advance just before this interview, I said, dude, I haven't read the book. But again, I get it. These guys want to get the word out on it and can't wait much longer. So eventually I'll be like, oh my God, I got to talk to the guy again because I just read the book and this is in it, that's in it, what have you.